Avery is a senior mentor of IEEE, and he has experience technology executive. And he has worked in multiple companies like NXP, Infineon, Toshiba, Rainbow, and so on. And Avery currently is a partner and the head of business development of Adventuring Capital Group. Now, let's welcome Avery with a warm applause.
So while Brian puts the slides up. So welcome everybody. I know you have other options on a Saturday afternoon, so I'm glad you're here. Hopefully you're enjoying the snacks and the drinks and the air conditioning, but hopefully this conversation, I would like this to have to be a conversation. I mean, we can also reserve the questions to the end, or if you would like to interrupt me along the way. I will go through kind of my experience, my journey, going from engineer all the way to investor, and kind of giving you a little bit of the tools of the trade to become more effective at communication and gain respect and be noticed. And so that's kind of the subject of what I'm going to talk about today. And later on, hopefully I have a chance to interact with you and learn kind of what your current goals are, and wherever you are in your career or even in your personal life, what you would like to do to improve your communication. Next. So I think the key things that you probably saw in the flyer, right? So today the goal is I boiled it down into 4. I mean, there's so many things you could do, right? Be composed, right? Always be confident, never let them see you sweat. So I can use an example. For instance, when I used to be a marketing guy or even a field application engineer, and I used to go in front of customers, right? I used to sweat a lot, be nervous. What am I going to say? I'm not the expert. You don't have to be the expert, right? You just know what you know, and you can always get the answer later. But really having that confidence and showing that, most people won't even tell that you're nervous, right? And be composed, right? Have good stance, a posture, and just be confident that even if you go into that, like for example, I used to be a startup entrepreneur. I go into an investor, right? I'm looking for money. You walk out of that meeting with your dignity, right? Whether you get the check or not, right? Because at the end of the day, you're a professional, the investor's a professional as well, right? Other thing, you want to create a narrative, like a story about yourself, right? So wherever you go to a networking event or you're meeting people, you want to be able to kind of paint a picture and kind of lead them on a journey and then eventually get people's interest, right? Tease them a little bit, because otherwise it's like, oh, my name is, I went to Berkeley and I do this. Dry, boring, right? But if I say, hey, how's the weather or something, and by the way, did you see that game over at Stanford, right? That kind of opens it up to be more personal, and you really have to interact and have rapport with people first before you start talking shop, right? Read the room. Right now I'm trying to read what you guys are thinking. Right? Is this guy boring? Is this dry? Do I get any benefit out of listening to this, right? Take in feedback. So feedback could be your body language, you're smiling, you're frowning, you're falling asleep, right? Build rapport with the audience, and also adjust your talk. Either verbally you're telling me feedback, or visually I can tell if I'm on the right track or if I'm losing you, right? And keep them engaged, right? Because you want to make sure that you're always connecting with your audience, right? With someone over here, right? Use eye contact. Be conscious of your body language, right? Your tone and delivery, right? Because if you shout or you emphasize words or whatever, it sends a certain message, and is that the message you want to send? Your body language, right? If I'm like this, I look like, okay, either I'm in command or I'm not wanting to listen to you, right? So you want to make sure that whatever your intended impression, if you're going for a job interview, if you're going for your, defending your PhD thesis, or you're going to, market yourself or even sell a product to a customer, right? What's the impression that you want your audience to have a takeaway when you leave the meeting, right? oh, that Avery, he's such an asshole, right? Or that Avery, he's such a nice guy, right? Or he's very capable, or I can trust him, or I can't trust him, right? So that's very important. Next. So here, I'm just gonna briefly kind of go over what I've done. So, I graduated with an EE degree in Santa Clara University back in 1995. So I was an engineer by name, right? Didn't know anything. Started in tech support. So as you know, tech support is the first job you get out of school, right? You're talking to very experienced engineers, customers. They're asking questions. They want you to know. They expect you to know. So you're learning a new company, first job, learning how to talk to people over the phone. It sounds easy, right? Not really, because what kind of feedback do you get when you're on the phone? You just get the voice, right? I can't see if the person's mad, sad, frustrated. I can feel it because usually the engineer's like, I'm ripping up my hair, I need to design this, I'm gonna lose my job, or I need to get the design done, place a route, so on, right? And then you go into the next job, right? FA, field application engineer. So in semiconductors, right, we call sales engineers to actually help support customers, pre and post sales, FAEs. So you go out in the field, now you develop a relationship with the customer, right? So you're not just getting a firefight situation where you're getting a call, but now you're under the gun because now you actually have to learn skills, how to communicate with someone face to face. That can be intimidating at first, right? But you learn that, and over time, right, as you expand, right, in my case, I went from a couple of products, right, and field programmable gate arrays, EDA, and then eventually now you have memory products and high-speed serial interfaces and clock chips and a whole bag of trips to Cypress, right? Then you move up and you start covering bigger territory. So I used to be just the Bay Area FAE for Cypress, but at AMI they wanted me to cover Oregon and Washington too, right? So now you have to deal with other states, other people, other personalities, right? Then when you get to Toshiba, right? Longest part of my history, 8+ years working for one company, right? 6 months later, they lay off all our FAEs and kept 2 of the youngest guys, right? Me and the other guy in Irvine. And by the way, you're gonna be a sales guy now. So you actually have a target on your back. You have a number, right? So before, as an FAE, you just have design wins, right? As long as the engineer sends you an email or verbally commits that I'm gonna use $18 million of your MOSFET or your ASIC, you're fine. As a sales guy, you're saying, but $18 million of that design win, I only got $9 million of purchase orders. Where did the other $9 million go? So you probably have another competitor, right? Second source that stole that. So now you have a different set of things you have to worry about because as a sales guy, a global account manager, you're not only dealing with engineers, you're dealing with purchasing. And purchasing can drive a hard bargain and negotiate, especially if you're going to Apple, right? Then you have to deal with ODMs, right? Original design manufacturers, people who make subsystems, contract manufacturers like Foxconn overseas. So daytime, you're working with customers over here, Cisco, Western Digital, Apple. Nighttime, you're working with Foxconn, right? On high, other people overseas, making sure that whatever was committed here is actually going to be designed over there, right? And so you have to expand your horizons of your communication skills because you're now dealing with business people, right? Or even technicians or other people. And then when you go into marketing, that's a whole different ballgame because sales is you sell what you've got, right? Or you talk to the customers, develop new products with marketing to sell in the future. But marketing, now you have a budget. So your boss says, okay, you own these products, you have to develop new products, and by the way, you own the number. So it's not just a sales number. So each salesperson, right, you might have hundreds of salespeople in the United States or North America, but you're the marketing person covering all the United States. So all the revenue is now your number, right? So now you have to know how to talk to your bosses, right? Manage up. So people always say you manage people under you, manage people cross-functional. You have to learn how to communicate with your boss too, because how do you manage and tell them the truth, but difficult truths in a way that you don't lose your job, right? Right? And as you move up also, as an engineer, I wrote long specs, gave to my boss, right? When you become a salesperson or a marketing person, all the boss wants to know is how much, when you need it, can we make the sales, can we hit the budget within this time frame, what are your challenges, can I clear those roadblocks for you, right? It's not about showing you every little spec, every little price, every little, detail, right? They don't need that. Then, right, segment marketing. So now you're looking at the whole segment, the whole market, right? So that's a more specialized area. So I was dealing with solar energy storage, data centers, right? And then eventually business development. So business development is kind of like, before you even have business, you have to figure out what products can I develop, what kind of markets can I go after, right? I was in charge of industrial IoT, so you have to go after Honeywell, Cisco, those guys, and learn how to communicate also with internally the business units, BUs. So as a business development guy, I was no longer reporting into each business unit. I was reporting directly to a VP that reported to CEO, and my job was hard because now I have to convince the 4 business units in NXP to work with me. They have no reason to, right? Because they don't report to me, and they had their standard MBOs or goals separate from mine, right? So I had to convince them why they have to work across the aisle to solve a problem, to develop new products for a Honeywell or these major customers, right? And then, while I was in between jobs, one of the CASPA members started a wearable IoT AI startup. And he asked me to join because he said, well, your English is good, and also you're a business guy, and you can go get funding. I said, really? He said, you're going to be my chief marketing officer. I said, what's that? I said, I'm a corporate guy. I've always worked for someone. I never worked for myself. Right? So this was a total change right back 2014. Now I'm on my own. I don't have the big business card from Infineon or Toshiba to go in and people will give you a chance to talk to you, right? You are nobody. You're someone. Politics Scientific, who is that, right? Is a new company. So you have to go in, but now you actually have to talk to bigger people, more influential people, and how are you going to do that, right? I had to go to investors and convince them why I should get funding for my startup, why this wearable was going to disrupt the whole industry, right? I had to go meet with Nike's CTO. I was like shaking my boots, like I've never done this. Like he's a CTO, I'm a nobody. But you have to go in and you say, the communication is what's in it for him, what's the information that we value for him, why would he take the meeting, right? And that's what I did, right? So I went in and told him that we wanted to do this install, work with Nike, deploy these, and then eventually do a SaaS platform where we would use AI and ML to give you real-time information about your running skill, right? That didn't work out, but I learned how to do that, right? So, in the moving up, right? Eventually working with startups, not only on my own, but doing an Action Spot venture studio. So basically having a collective of companies to work with and trying to help them, right? Leverage our resources to help them get funding, get their proof of concepts to minimum viable product, and then eventually kind of a business model to make sure they could get funded and be successful. So, and then that takes me up to I did 3 startups and eventually got into venture capital, right? So I kind of fell into it because my third startup, doing silicon carbide, my 70-year-old Hungarian-American co-founder said, my daughter wants to hire me as a scout for this new VC fund. I think you would like to do that, right? So now you have different things because now I talk to lawyers all the time. So again, I'll talk about kind of the different areas you could focus on, whether you want to be an individual contributor, whether you're a student, whether you want to move up in the technical route or the business route, right? These communication skills are good for everyone. Okay, next. So who here believes leaders are born and who believes that you can become one? Show of hands, how many people think that you have to be born a leader? How many people believe that you actually have the potential, if groomed correctly, to become a leader? I like that. So, right, the definition is born leaders are people with an innate, that means you already came with it, capacity to effectively manage and lead groups of people to achieve a collective goal. But remember, innate does not mean that you were born that way. Innate means maybe there's something in you that unless you realize it, you just don't know is there, that hasn't surfaced, right? So that's why I believe everybody has that capability, right? Or most people. It's just if you have the desire and a passion and something will drive that up to a surface, right? And so, really, if you look at this, right, we all start here. Hard work in our specific fields of expertise, individual contributor. And then opportunities come along, right? Maybe that promotion, maybe that next project with more responsibility, maybe, whatever it is, right? But along the way, you're gonna have challenges and trial and error. That's fine, right? But it's how you deal with it, right? And if someone knocks you down, resilience, right? Can you bounce back up? Can you learn quickly from the mistake and never repeat it and grow, right? You're gonna have disappointment. How do you take disappointment, right? Risks. There's always risks in life, right? We always try to do calculated risks, like, well, if I leave this job, it's cushy, I've got a good boss, I like my colleagues, I'm making decent money, don't really want to rock the boat, but it's nice over there. I could be kind of doing more, passionate projects, or over there I could be making more money, or there I can see myself doing something else, but I don't know, I'm not sure. So that's why confidence, right? So you have to judge yourself and evaluate what's the good blend of not being overconfident, but being confident enough, and also calculating the risks, right? To meet some of the opportunities and challenges, which can lead you to be a successful person or a successful leader. So again, I think these kind of summarize kind of what the 4 key points that we kind of put in the act, right? But really the key things, and this is true of everybody, right? Making eye contact. Like when I'm looking at everybody here, I'm looking at him, right? I'm looking at her a little bit, right? Just to personalize that, to kind of get connection so that person doesn't think I'm just looking in a sea of people, right? Ask questions to clarify when needed, and don't turn the conversation to what you want to talk about. So right now, I'm kind of talking at you, but I'm hopefully that from your feedback, it is valuable, or if it's not, you can tell me, and so I can alter my course and make it more tailored for what you guys need, right? Show genuine interest in other ideas. So when you talk to people, right? How many people have you talked to where they're kind of, yeah, right? Show interest. Give people a chance to explain themselves, and maybe you'll learn something, maybe you'll connect with that person, maybe you won't. But I think that's very important, because I think good leaders, that's very important. It's not just about me pushing down my ideas, but sometimes you might have an idea that I didn't think about, and you can stand up and respectfully tell me, hey boss, I think maybe we should do it this way. And I think a good leader would be, that's not a bad idea. Maybe we should try that, right? Because again, a good leader knows what they're good and not good at, and so everybody around them can complement them. Set clear expectations, right? So again, if you say you're going to do something, do it, and then just make sure that you set the right expectations so people don't overpromise and underdeliver, right? So know your audience and read the room, and then reinforce your intent with body language. So I think using body language is very important. I think often we tend to be more reserved. I know when I was younger, I didn't use as much body language, it's kind of more stiff, just tell verbally, right? But I think expressing yourself is actually a good thing. There's a balance of that. So look at these Fortune 10, this is a little old, this is 2021, but I just grabbed this from the internet. So Fortune 10 CEOs who attended these colleges, right? Notice only one guy here, does not represent everybody, but this one is Harvard. Everybody else graduated from a smaller college. But what is common amongst all these people is, whether they were straight A students or C students, you won't know, because at the end of the day, they possess some of these skills, or all of these skills, that allow them to communicate effectively, which allow them to move up the chain to become the top captain of their industry and their company, right? So wherever you would like to be in your future, whether it's career or personal, right, growth, you set that target and you can achieve that as you improve these skills. So I think oftentimes, this is oversaid, a lot of you probably have heard presentation like this, but IQ is overrated, right? I mean, everybody's smart, everybody's straight A's, everybody does well. I mean, Asians, right? You have Asians, we're not Asians, right? So, but ultimately, right, EQ and SQ are very important. What's EQ? Emotional quotient, or emotional intelligence, and social quotient. People tend to talk a lot about EQ, right? Because it's so focused on your self-awareness and self-regulation. So being aware is very important of what you are good at and not good at, and how you perceive the world, how others perceive you, right? But what do you do with that, right? You also have to self-regulate. I mean, how many times have you gotten mad at your boss, your kids, your spouse, your whoever, right? And you're writing this really nasty letter, right? But you're glad you did not hit the email, send, or you rip up the letter later on, right? So it's okay to get it out of your system, but it's also how to regulate, right, your emotions in the appropriate way, in the appropriate time. And SQ, right, understanding social structures and dynamics. So again, what do you do with it? Even if you know all this, right? There's a lot of dynamics happening, right? We talk about politics, we talk about other things, right? Why at work, sometimes you work well with your colleagues, sometimes you don't. You're the same person, right? Maybe in one company it works, another doesn't, because there's some dynamic, right? So if you figure out what that dynamic is, right, are you adaptable, right? Can you be influential, right? Those kind of things, very important. So I'm gonna dig a little deeper. So I like this. We'll provide the slides later on. I mean, these are all credited to whoever created these. But ultimately, right, here in emotional intelligence, there are 5 key elements. Self-awareness, right, which is this color here. Self-regulation, right, which is this other color here, orange. Motivation, right, which is the pink. And then you've got empathy and social skills, so the rest of the colors. So why is this important, right? So self-awareness, right, recognizing your own emotions and how they affect your thoughts and behavior, and know your strengths and weaknesses, and have self-confidence. So, you know, if you, was it Art of War, right? Know yourself, know your enemy, right? So if you know that, then you can be successful, right? Self-regulation, right? Controlling impulsive feelings and behaviors, managing your emotions in healthy ways. And then motivation, right? So commitment, optimism, drive, right? What gets you up in the morning? What makes you want to do or achieve a goal? You know, whether you want to run that marathon, or you want to achieve that you know, peel it apart, right? And then empathy, right? I think empathy is a key thing. I can't emphasize it most enough. I mean, you empathize with other people, doesn't mean you always agree with their ideas, but you empathize, and that can get you a long way, especially with your customers, with your colleagues, with your boss. And that actually is a very key thing, a trait that a leader should have. And then, of course, social skills, right? So that's just developing that over time, right? But ultimately, these are kind of in more detail what these are, but I think it's very important to focus on this area. So we always talk about introvert, extrovert. And honestly, people always think Asians are more introverted, right? So, but that's not true, right? This has nothing to do with race. In fact, introvert, extrovert, or ambivert in the middle has more to do with how you see it and interact with the world, right? It's actually a choice. It's not really predefined. And actually, if you ever took Myers-Briggs and those kind of things, it can change, right? I used to be INTJ or something back in when I first started science. Now probably something else now, right? But that should not be the defining factor for you, right? You will change as you grow, as you learn different skills, as you experience different things in life, challenges, good and bad, right? But the modern Western culture just judges this, and they misjudge Asians a lot. Okay, so we just have to be cognizant of that. We can't change that overnight, but a lot of studies have been done, and I'm passionate because, so my background, I was born in America, right? Born in Michigan. My parents are actually from Hong Kong. My mom's Fujian Chinese, and my dad's Cantonese, right? They came here, met in Michigan, and got married, and that's why my brother and I are here. But ultimately, right, at the end of the day, we tend to be taught to be humble, right? To do our work, to demonstrate our worth through our work. You know, I've got this degree, I did well for the boss, I did this. But I always give this talk to everybody, especially younger generation, right? Some of us older ones, we still can grow, like Gary said, but the younger generation, you have a unique position now. I mean, look at, right now in the presidential election, we have a woman, half Indian, half black lady that's running for president. What does that mean to you? That means you have a chance to be the next CEO of a Fortune 10, Fortune 500 company that you did not start. So Jensen is great, but he started his own company. Eric is great, he started his own company, Zoom. Jack Ma is great, he started Alibaba, and Morris Chang started his own company, TSMC. But keep in mind, these guys were passed over promotion, were not running Western companies, right? I mean, it doesn't take away their success, but what I would like to see is more of the Lisa Su's, right? More of the Hak Tangs. These are examples where you, as the younger generation, have this opportunity to rise even higher than some of us, okay? So you could be CEO, you could be the next Supreme Court Justice of the United States, you could be President of the United States. You can be a lot of things, right? So sky's the limit, and I want to encourage you that hopefully with these skills and kind of more open mind, that we're not just resigned to being the good engine, but we can be the driver of the engine.
Question.
Yeah.
Would you intend this to be interactive, or would you like to answer the question at the end?
We can do interactive, yeah.
Okay. Then can I ask the first question?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I missed earlier a little bit. I wonder.
Well, thank you so much. Well, thanks for sharing so much wisdom. My first question is, what are the learning objectives from this session? Thank you. So that I can connect the dots.
Oh, okay. Well, so the learning objective really is to build confidence, to feel comfortable about public speaking, to feel comfortable about, I guess, going out there, networking, and also thinking that you can rise up the ranks, whether you want to go up the technical route, the business route, whatever it is, right? Ultimately, I mean, a lot of these slides are leadership type slides, but ultimately, I mean, the title is communicate like a natural born leader. I think a lot of that has to do with also what we call leadership skills. A lot of that is really, the core of it is communication, right? I mean, why are people more successful? It's not because they're smarter or brighter. I mean, they are smart, but they, look at, I talked to one school teacher. She goes, I hate to say it, Avery, but my elementary students who are C students, they're actually going to be CEOs who are going to be running the company that all the A students are going to be working for. That's actually very true, right? And I think our previous speaker, who was CTO of Western Digital from a couple months ago, right? He said the same thing. He said, as you move up, you should go from A student to C student, right? And that's not saying you shouldn't strive to be the best. It just means that you have a different set of skills, because someone who maybe gets C in school is not because they're not smart. It's because they feel like this is not useful. They see the bigger vision, right? But they see everything, and they can manage that when they get older. Yeah, hopefully that clarifies. Okay. So, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Warren Buffett, Barack Obama, Abraham Lincoln, Albert Einstein, Guy Kawasaki, Michael Jordan. Name goes on and on. Do you think these guys are introverts or extroverts? Well, why do you think so? Well, Isaac Newton, I mean, you can make a joke. You can say, well, he was with an apple in the tree, so he's a loner, right? But, I mean, honestly, right, you might think, some of these kind of look like they might be introverts, right? And some of these people look like they're more extroverts. But let's click on the next one. They're all introverts. And it's very interesting because actually many years ago, I remember reading Richard Nixon, former President Nixon. He was actually an introvert. But introvert doesn't mean that you cannot go out and talk to people in public. It just means that you need time for yourself and you associate with the world differently, right? Because my wife and my brother-in-law, right? My brother-in-law worked for A's for 30-some years. He was the broadcast marketing guy, PR guy, right? Went to all the events. But he's so tired at the end of the day because he said, Avery, I don't like dealing with people. But that's his skill, that's what he does, and everybody hires him for that. So that's why you see all these people, successful people, leaders, introverts.
Question.
Yeah.
So for the political leader like Abraham and Barack Obama,
Mm-hmm.
so they are introvert?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because they are speaking, so much in public, and also, kind of like, they are galvanize the people, and yeah.
But see, introverts have deep introspection. They think a lot, which means when they go out and talk, they have a lot to share. So it doesn't mean that they don't feel comfortable going out. It just means that talking to people can be draining, right? And again, that has to do with how you manage things, right? Right? Extroverts actually, if you go back to the slide, 2 slides above.
That's what's extrovert.
Okay. What does it say here? Extrovert leaders are valued highly regardless of the reality of their performance. Some people talk all the time. I had a boss, Chinese American, okay, born in Boston. He was at Infineon. Now, Infineon's Germans like to talk. They like to argue. Yours truly worked as a marketing manager. I was pretty successful at Infineon for 2 years. But you know what I got on my review? My review was, Avery, you don't command the meeting when you're in the meeting with Apple. They go, what do you mean? I just brought you $18 million of design wins. Yeah, that's great. I said, I don't have to talk all the time to make an impact. When I talk, it's valuable. He talks all the time, my boss, okay? He talks, and the Germans perceived him as valuable, but he was actually very hollow, right? So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying you can't talk. I'm not saying extroverted leaders are not good either. That's their personality. But by itself, being extrovert does not define how well you do, right? Whether you're introvert, ambivert, extrovert, it's about your substance, about what you deliver. It's not about the loud noise. But unfortunately, even these days, right, we're looking for a president who is charismatic. What does that mean? What if the president is just talking and doesn't do anything, right? So that's why this is important for us to recognize, because unfortunately, Asians, Chinese, we are looked upon kind of always respectful, humble, quiet. So we can be more assertive in the meeting, right? We don't have to be rude, but we can offer our opinion occasionally. And when we say something, we say a value. Trust me, your bosses, your colleagues will listen. They'll realize you're very valuable. Maybe the next promotion, they'll consider you.
So Avery, are you introvert or extrovert?
So, good question. So, I haven't done the measurement recently, but I think I might be introvert because INTJ, I think, my grade back when I did it back in 1998 or 1995, my first job, I was introverted, right? But nowadays, you could never tell, right? I might still be, right? I do get drained when I deal with a lot of people, but you know what's funny? It's kind of contradictory because I love going to network events. I love doing these things. I love talking to you guys, which is kind of rare because my wife and my brother-in-law, they're introverted, but they don't like, right? And I told my wife, I said, every job they want to hire you is outside. She doesn't want you, I want to be alone. I said, that's not what they want you for. Because they can tell you have something, right?
So any example of the extrovert leaders and like famous people, extrovert? Because you have all the introvert.
I know.
Which means maybe the extrovert, extrovert people cannot be a leader, or they don't have the deep thoughts or something.
No. So okay, but I would have to go Google it, right? Because what happens is I only looked up the introvert thing only because we want to focus on debunking the myth about introverts. Okay. But there are a lot of examples of good extrovert leaders too. I'm sure we can Google later. Okay. Sorry, I didn't pull that up. So what does this mean? Okay, so I like this because when I saw this on LinkedIn, email like a boss. So there's always different ways to say the same thing and get a different effect from people, right? You can be very passive. You can be very apologetic. I think as Asians, as Chinese, we're respectful, so we're always apologetic. But sometimes to our fault, because when we say that, like sorry, it makes us look weak, right? You should acknowledge there may or may not be a problem or that there may be an issue, but you shouldn't come off in a way that sounds like we're coward, right? So, like for example, it took a while, but you can deal, sorry for the delay. It sounds harmless, right? I used to say that too. But instead, say thanks for your patience, right? You see how that's very different? Or hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if you have questions. right? Hopefully it sounds like, oh man, I don't have confidence. At least you have confidence, but it sounds like you don't have it, right? Again, all these are perceptions, right? Could I possibly leave early? Like a doctor would, right? I will need to leave for at. So you are actively telling them, I'm leaving. I'm not asking for permission, but this is the nice way to say, I'm giving you a heads up, right? So that's important. So the only thing I want to say here is try to use assertive language to exude confidence and command of your situation, right? Never come off arrogant, but always come off like you're ready to go, move forward, positive, and also determined, right, to do the right thing. So this one is more, Elon talks about innovation, and he talks about entrepreneurship, right? And I talk about entrepreneurship a lot, but I only pulled out a few things. I mean, paint a picture, telling a story. The key thing is know how to tell a story that has some impact to your audience, to the person you're talking, whether it's one-on-one or with a group. Because that impact will be something that that person will remember you by and may be useful later on, right? Create a sense of urgency or call to action. So if there's something important that people always have what, FOMO, fear of missing out, right? So if you want to tell them something important and something that they should perceive as important, you want to make sure and then have them have some way to act, right? Whether you want, hey, investor, I've got this great startup and you're going to miss out if you don't, invest in this or consider us, right? Or, if you don't buy this next widget, it'll be sold out and you'll be the only person that doesn't have the next iPhone, right? That kind of thing. And also, whenever you go to your boss, when I was younger, I used to, boss, there's a problem. You know what boss said? Only come to me if you have a proposed solution. Don't just come and tell me something negative. And it took me a while to figure that out. Now, the proposed solution doesn't mean that I always get it right. But it kind of gets you thinking, like, what's in it for him? He probably knows about the problem too. If he had solved it, he would have solved it. He doesn't need you, right? But if you can add value and say, hey, what about this? It might be something that he or she did not think of that might be good for the company, good for them, right? Always pique your audience's interest, right? Spark intrigue. So have a little bit of a teaser, a little bit of a mystery about it. Otherwise, if I tell you everything, you don't need to know anything about me, why would you want to deal with me anymore, right? So that's what you do when you try to negotiate with a customer or when you go, interview with someone, right? You want to leave something with the interviewer like, I have that itch that I need to scratch because Avery, that guy's interesting. I want to talk to him some more, learn more about his experience. Maybe he would be great for our team, right? Or, yeah, maybe that Apologist Scientific is a good investment. He just told me enough to whet my appetite, but I don't know everything about it. I want to learn more. Let me get my other co-investors to come have a meeting with him and learn more, right? Build rapport and trust your audience. So at the end of the day, your value as a person is to become the trusted person, or I used to call it trusted advisor, with your customers, with the people around you. So people feel comfortable coming to you and ask you for advice or favors, right? If they don't trust you, they won't even bother, right? They won't remember you. And of course, if you have, convey a vision, whatever your vision is, right? As appropriate to whoever you're talking to, right? If you're talking to Nike CTO, why did he care? You say, well, because I can get you more business, right? And I have the technology to prove it, and I can actually increase your sales, right? Okay, next. So this is probably very relevant to everybody here, right? Whenever you go to an event, some people like going to networking, some people hate it, right? And a lot of times they hate it because they don't know what to do, or they don't know what they're going to get out of it, right? So always go with a purpose, right? Like for example, if you came here and you want to meet some people and learn about communication or learn about how can we kind of mentor each other and help each other, you would do your study and find out, okay, who's going to be there? Who should I talk to? Why would I go there? What am I going to get out of it if I go there, right? Use inside contact. So, for instance, if I know Brian and I'm coming to this event and I don't know any of you, I'll call Brian and say, hey, by the way, can you kind of introduce me to some people? Because I'm cold turkey. I'm coming in, nobody knows. I feel uncomfortable. They'll say, yeah, I know Gary. I know, Ian? And then maybe Ian say, oh, Avery's interesting enough, I'm going to introduce it to my other friends, right? Be a lone ranger. So how often do we do this? We go with our friends or our spouse or whoever, we go to a meeting. Our intention is to meet that investor. Our intention is to meet some new friends. Our intention is to meet that next employer. But we end up sitting around talking to our friends and the same people we know. Then we can do that at home. We don't need to go here, right? So you should learn how to mingle and move around the room. So if you have, let's say, the networking thing is 2 hours. You say, okay, I want to meet 5 people. But 2 hours later, 5 minutes before 2 hours is up, you go, I'm still with Brian. I know Brian, but I haven't met anybody, right? So you have to have a target. Also, remember we talked about social dynamics? Observe group formation. So that's why always it's good to go to a networking event early, even before they start, because you might be the first one or second one. You can talk to the organizer, right? Even if you don't know them. And they might introduce you to some of the people, and then you can start, because once people start coming, they form their cliques, their groups, it's hard to break in, because they're already with their buddies or people, they won't accept a new person, right? Be aware of your own body language. Are you giving off positive vibes or negative vibes, right? When you go in. Break the ice. Come up with something interesting. Don't say, I remember my wife when I first met her in New York, right? She's from Oakland, I was from Fremont, but we met in New York. We're at Asian Summit, right? I said, why did you talk to me? She goes, because all the guys in New York, the first thing they said is, did you graduate from an Ivy League college? How much you make, and where do you work? She said, I went to Berkeley. Oh, you must be a liberal. So the thing is, and so that's what I'm saying. It's like, name, rank, serial number. That's boring. But, you go over and you see someone with a Giants hat. Oh, how was that game to Giants the other day, right? Or you talk to that person and you notice something like they have a CASPA pin. Hey, you go to CASPA. Find something interesting to try to break the ice and connect with someone. Remember, it's all about connection, the communication and connection. Handshake. How many times have you met someone, like this handshake, or it's like all wet and... No, when I shake hand, firm handshake, right, and eye contact. Eye contact, firm handshake, right? Or don't do it. Because you have to show your sincerity and that you're confident, right? And that you want to engage, you want to talk. Ask open-ended questions. Don't do yes and no, right? Always who, what, when, where, how, right? Because open-ended questions allows me, like, hey, where did you go for dinner last night? And he starts talking, and I go, oh, yeah, we were there the other night, it's great. Right? So you can keep the conversation going. It doesn't stop. Okay, this was the problem I had in the past. Hey, I'm Avery, here's a business card, give everybody. Most people don't care about my business card because they don't even know who I am and why would they care? They throw it in the garbage, right? So wait until someone actually likes you enough that they say, hey, I want to connect. Or maybe you like them enough after a while, and then you start asking, hey, would it be okay to trade contact information, right? Then now that person would treat that contact, in the case here in WeChat, right? I won't ask for WeChat right away, but I'll do WeChat after I get to know you, right? Because now you want to connect with me, and we want to keep that connection after this meeting. Offer to help where you can, and don't expect it. So sometimes you're there, and you notice there's something you could help out, either the organizer or some of the people. If it's a small thing, just do it, because that also builds a bond, right? It's like, oh man, I have carrying stuff to the car, and it's like, so little things like this kind of builds, like, wow, that person has good character, that person is generous, that person is nice, that person is interesting, right? This person is someone I would like to continue learning more about. Okay, so this eye chart, I'm not going to cover it too much, but really what I'm trying to say here is challenging conversations is another level that we all don't like to have. Whether it's a challenging conversation to tell your daughter something, or a challenging conversation to have with your boss, or with someone who works for you, right? Or your friends, or even your spouse, right? So all that really hinges on trust. If you don't have trust, everything else is out the window, right? And even with customers or with supply people, when you're dealing with the sales, if there's no trust, why would they listen to you, right? Now, obviously, a challenging conversation could be you disagree already at the beginning. So how we get to agreement, right? So That's why, going back to, remember, talk about emotional intelligence, social intelligence, how do you stay calm, right, given the situation? You acknowledge the feelings. So feelings, my wife always tells me, feelings is not a right or wrong. It's a fact that you feel that way. Now, whether or not there are facts behind that feeling, that's different, right? But you have to acknowledge and understand the context. Like sometimes we jump to the gun and we jump to the conclusions, right? We should really know what's going on, what's the really background, know the feelings, listen to the other side, be direct and honest, right? And use I statements. Don't say you did that, you did, because those are accusatorial, right? So I, right? Like for example, I feel frustrated when this happens because that phrase is true. You do feel frustrated, right? It's a feeling. And then find areas where you can find agreement, and then decide how to move forward, right? How to work together. I mean, you may not just solve the problem right away, but it takes time. So, I know it's been pretty long, but I wanted to conclude with this. My daughter's really admires Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of our former U.S. Supreme Court justices. Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you, right? So ultimately, having these skills, whether you're trying to convince someone at the market, like the Loa Paul, trying to convince her why she should sell her, lettuce for cheaper, right? And to lead her to do that, or convincing a big corporation to cut a deal, or to convince another leader, right? If you're president of the United States, to change the way you're dealing with other countries. These skills can be valuable for you, because remember, at the end of the day, you can be a leader because you are your own CEO of your life, right? Whether you're looking for a job or with other people, how you interact with the world. So, thank you.
Yeah, I also have a quick question about the introvert to extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I feel like all the people can make very good speech, no matter you are introvert or extrovert. So the people listed looks like they are in all the public events, they are making all the public speech. Looks like extrovert, but actually they are introvert, as you showed. Is that possible for people who was introvert before and they trained to be the extrovert after they make so many exercise on public speech and public communication?
I think you can definitely migrate yourself, right, if you desire, or you have that propensity to do that. I don't think you're stuck being, just like we all grow in different ways. Okay, let me use an example. When I was born, my parents always complained I talked too much, I was talkative, right, when I was little. And then suddenly, because I moved from Michigan when I was 10 here, so I used to go to private school in K through second grade, or K through fourth grade in Michigan, right? So I was accustomed to being in Michigan at a private school in a small community, right, Ann Arbor, where the University of Michigan is. Then 10 years old, I come here in 1982. New state, new city, public school, new friends, new environment, right? A lot of changes for a 10-year-old to take. So I became more, if you want to say, introverted or quiet, right? Because reclusive, because I made friends, but I didn't make a whole lot of friends. I had tons of friends when I was in Michigan, okay? That happened all the way through college. I was kind of more quiet. I had a small circle of friends, that's it. After college, when I was on tech support, I was also kind of like that. But I said, I want to get back to how I used to be when I was 10, when I was younger. And how do I do that? I'm going to all these Asian networking events, right? And I'm gonna push myself. And since I'm talking to people, I would like to go out and actually work a job, my day job, to work with people. So I ended up being an FAE, field application engineer. So that took some growth because I had to be like, I'm used to talking to people over the phone, but now I'm in front of, I have to go train a whole bunch of engineers, right, for a lunch and learn, or I have to go present, or I have to go shake hands and talk to actual engineers, right, in public, in person. That was scary. So, question, I'm a natural introvert, but why when I was born I was so talkative, right? I like to express myself. So, can't explain it, right? But I think you can move back and forth. I don't think you have to be fixed one way or the other. You might be naturally introverted, but doesn't mean you can't do extroverted things, or vice versa, right? Yeah.
Okay. Our mentally, Gary have the Q&A session with you.
Yeah, okay. Now, let's talk about this way. So I would, I asked after listening to your presentation, I feel like everybody might have some questions. So I would like to ask you one question. After this one question, during this time he's answering, you can also think about your own question that I gave you, not I do. Everybody will have the chance to ask some questions. I think that's a better setup so that everybody can get involved together. Basically, this session is for everybody get involved. You have questions, we answer each other, right? We just discuss. Might not have we might have some clear guide in the future. That's what I'm trying to do. So my question to you right now, single question, is you said your parents from Hong Kong, and you 10-year-old something, you moved to US and 10-year-old transferred to here and Rome, right? You must encounter a lot cultural barriers or something, right? And during this kind of a process, during this whole life experience, do you, like us, we all from different countries, right? Do you have any kind of recommendations? How do you get involved into this new culture? And how do you get out from your old culture and get into the new culture? How did you do it?
Well, so I think when I was younger, I did not feel like I had the tools. My parents were from Hong Kong. They're very Chinese, right? So I was raised understanding very Chinese values, which are great. But then I would go to Hong Kong and visit my grandma and my grandpa, right? Both sides, they spoke Cantonese with me, but, understanding the whole different culture. I mean, as family, they accept you, but in some ways, they also don't accept you because, ABC, you're like banana. You're born here, you kind of look like us, you understand a little bit, but you're Americanized, right? I think coming here was actually more of a shock because you would think, I'm American, I'm with American kids, and whether it's Michigan or here, it should be the same. Well, not really, because I think the kids here were not as accepting, right? But I think to answer the question is, you kind of learn quickly how to communicate differently with different groups, right? I mean, even if you're communicating with a fellow American, right? Someone who's from Tennessee or someone who's from Michigan or someone from California, even Northern California, Southern California would be very different depending on how they're brought up, right? So even though we speak English, it's a common language, but it's how we kind of figure out the nuances, between the lines, the pauses, the body language, everything, you can figure out how people are different. And same thing with Chinese. I mean, coming here, the good thing was because Bay Area has more Chinese, so we wanted more Chinese food, we interacted with more Chinese people, right? In Michigan, we had a very limited number of Chinese people. But same thing, right? Learning those nuances, learning the differences, I think was very invaluable. And those are very important too, because like I said, I was dealing with engineers from different backgrounds, right? Whether they had an Indian accent or Chinese accent or a Texan accent on the phone, trying to figure out how they were thinking differently than I, right? To solve their problem. I think that through every one of those journeys I told you, right? It's kind of learning how to deal with that. I mean, I work for Taiwanese companies, right? American companies, Swiss company, Dutch, right? German, Japanese. They're all very different. I mean, you think it's just a human, and we're all in tech, and we're talking about this MOSFET or this ASIC or whatever. No. But still, there's that human element that comes in that you have to figure out how to communicate them and relate to them differently, right? So.
Yeah, I think that's good. But my thinking is, do you have encountered any difficulties or something? Can you think of anything that you figure out a way to overcome it, or something like that happening before in your life?
Well, so I could use a couple examples. Like for instance, when I was young and I was in college, so I went to a church fellowship group on Friday nights, and I'm born here, right? So everybody was trying to say, you should go to the English-speaking one. I said, no, I want to go to the Hong Kong Cantonese-speaking one. But you don't read Chinese. I said, no, I speak Cantonese. I want to learn more Cantonese. I want to relate to my people more. I don't want to, English, I can do that at work, at school. I don't want to do that. So that's what I did, right? So that built up my confidence and also learning of how to deal with more people. And then later on, I remember after I graduated, I went on a trip with Monty J, Yusan, right? So they're Taiwanese, right? So yeah, Taiwanese are Chinese, but they're also a little different than Chinese from mainland or Chinese from Hong Kong, Chinese from Singapore. So I learned kind of how Taiwanese communicate, right? Differently, right? So I've always had this motivation that if I want to improve myself, and if I feel like there's something lacking, I should really go into that kind of, I guess you could say, the dead wolves or whatever, right, with whoever, and try to learn and adapt, right? And I think that makes you more, fluid and adaptable to all kinds of situations, right? And I think that's why I even talk to some of the mentees here, and they say, Avery, I want to improve my English. I work at Microsoft, or I work at whatever Synopsys, but all the Chinese people all eat lunch together. And I said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with eating lunch together, but maybe you should eat lunch with your Indian colleagues and your white friends and all that, because it's a perception, right? Oh, you guys are all the Chinese guys, you bring your own lunch, you're over there. But you can do that offline. In the workplace, you need to kind of integrate and mingle, because then people will appreciate you more. They say, you're part of the team, you're willing to go out for drinks with us afterward. That's very important, right? Build the relationships. Building relationships will actually go a long way to helping you advance in your career and in your life and your friends. I mean, I have long-term friends of all kinds of races from Toshiba because we spend so much time after hours together where our families, our kids play together. I think these lifelong friends I would never trade for anything, even though we no longer work at the same place, right? So.
Okay. I think that's a good thing for us to know, right? You go lunch with different people. Anyway, that's the end of my question. I think the answer. So I would like to give everybody, if you have any questions, just go ask them to let them answer.
Yeah, anyone, any audience, you can have the opportunity to ask a question, just raise your hand.
Thanks for the sharing, Avery. I have a question about how to balance between being humble and being polite in conversations versus being confident and being assertive in meetings or group discussions. Especially, I had a feeling of trying to be more polite when working with Asian colleagues. Even it's like a workplace in the U.S., but when you're facing in with a lot of Asian people, you kind of have that inner voice telling me to be more polite and humble about expressing myself. How do you manage that balance?
Okay.
Thanks.
Maybe for more context, when you say Asian, you're talking about East Asians, right? Chinese or Taiwanese or Koreans or Japanese. Because it's very different from our South Asian friends, right? Because our Indian friends are very assertive. I have a lot of good friends, okay? Even I have a good friend who I work consulting with him. Sometimes he's a little bit too, and I have to pull him back and say, you're a little bit too much. So there's a way, yes. So balancing confidence and humility are important because you never want to be, so I put up Elon Musk, he's not my favorite, okay? So he's actually an example where you shouldn't be that way, right? He has good ideas, he gets stuff done, but he's very rude and a jerk. Never follow him. I would follow Warren Buffett, okay? But it's a balance of showing your confidence and demonstrating through your work, through your comments, through your knowledge, that you know your stuff and that you're actually contributing to the company. But you don't have to outright brag, right? But you just have to let people know that, hey, yeah, I was responsible for that piece, and this is kind of what I know about that piece. And through that, people understand that you actually are in charge of that and that you contributed immensely to that, right? I think oftentimes we feel bad because our inner self, even me, I'm born here, right? It's like, well, my parents told me always, the boss is right, always. I said, no, he isn't. And then it's like, oh, you should never rock the boat, just do what you're told. Well, but sometimes doing what you're told is only good enough as the engine, like I talked about, right? If you're respectful with your boss or with your colleagues, you're actually contributing because you want to improve for the whole community, or in this case, your company, right? Let me use an example. One thing I learned doing a startup, in a corporation, you could hide, you could just do your work, get a salary, nobody ever promotes you, or you're just you're good enough. In a startup, it's very much exposed if you don't do your work, because feast or famine, right? I mean, I'm hungry, I need to get this, I need to get to the next thing, right? Sometimes you'll disagree with your co-founders, but at the end of the day, if the intention, if everybody's aimed at the right direction, we're doing it, we're criticizing Israel because we want what's best for the company. We're not doing it because my ego and your ego, right? So it's balancing what your intention is. If your intention is trying to improve your organization, to help your boss, to help your group do better at a project or whatever, that's nothing wrong. And I think we often feel like even that is too much for us to, air out or verbalize, right? But once you get used to it, it's not bad. And part of it is learning the artful way of tactfully saying it without actually attacking someone, right? And I think, or being sarcastic, right? So I think that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, you gave a very good speech and lots of information. And I may ask, for everybody, I'm going to share their PPT. Okay.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
All right. So the question is, because for what you're talking about, right? So you say the IQ and the EQ, SQ, and I hear about IQ and the EQ, but SQ, this is my first time to hear about this. Okay, so for the SQ, so can you, deliberate a little bit more, and also how do you practice your SQ? Maybe I don't know. Maybe my understanding, maybe for the SQ, you are aware, the relationship between the people who you deal with, or you can give maybe more information about this.
Okay. Well, I think, so usually, the last few years or decade, you've heard about EQ all the time, right? I mean, SQ, there's also AQ, there's other ones, right? Ultimately, what it's trying to say is you recognize your emotions, you recognize what to deal with your emotions, but there's a further than that, right? How do you apply it? And there are a lot of different dynamics in any human group, right? Okay, let me use an example. If you go to church, or you go to temple if you're Buddhist, or you go to company, or you go to school, don't you notice that still there's politics? And what we call politics is not because people are ill will, but people have commonalities and they kind of work together well. And when a new person tries to enter that group, it throws them off, right? Because how are we going to introduce this person? I mean, all our families, people know each other, we get along, everything's fine until this person showed up, right? So I think practicing that, when you're trying to penetrate or enter a group, the social interaction, learning what that dynamic or observing what that dynamic might be, and evaluating if that's a dynamic that you can accept or that you can adapt into and that they can accept you, right? I mean, I think I used the example earlier, sometimes I work for a company where, when I was at Infineon, it seemed like everybody loved me and HR loved me. Now, if anybody has a human resource and recruiter love you, there's something wrong with that company, right? Especially a big company, right?
Yeah.
I did not have that at NXP. NXP was okay, but the HR, I sent, Gary wants a job. I sent a resume. Never heard from them. But Infineon, they might have 100 applicants, but because I know Gary goes to the top of the list, right? So that dynamic was so much better. I mean, my bosses, even though I had that weird boss, but I actually did really well at Infineon because somehow the dynamic worked. And the funny thing is a lot of my old colleagues from Cyprus and other people happen to be the sales managers and people there. So it's oh, I know you. So again, SQ I think is important, trying to understand how to evaluate and assess the dynamic and how you think you can fit in, right? I mean, you may never fit in. And in that case, you have to decide, is it worth the risk and worth the reward, right? Going in there, or I should just give up, right?
So it's SQ is more like a structure, the social structure.
Yeah.
And also culture maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So culture is a big one, right? I mean, between, born here and then dealing with people overseas, right? Oh, you go to China, and the first thing the government official says, do you speak Chinese? I say, I speak Cantonese. So you don't speak Mandarin, so you don't speak Chinese. I said, excuse me? You're born in China. You should know that why the TV programs have hundreds and hundreds of channels of different languages, dialects. China is just not only Mandarin. Mandarin is the unifying language. It's not the only language, right? But then that that's kind of where you cannot win, right? Yeah.
Okay, so maybe another question.
Yeah.
So when you do, any public speech, you have said, kind of like, the structure for the speech, and maybe like, maybe you're doing toast, or maybe, some other event, you want to stand up to, say something. So you have some structure or pattern, so you can follow, so make it easy.
Well, I think anytime whether you're talking to your boss, right, formally one-on-one in the office, right, it doesn't have to be a formal speech, or whether you're talking to your kids, right, or talking to your colleagues, or actually doing a formal presentation like this, right, you should always have an outline already in your head or on paper of what topics you want to cover so you don't drift, right? So I think ultimately knowing where you want to end up, right? So hopefully after all this, you guys hopefully we achieved the 4 different things we mentioned in the advertisement, right? Being confident, right? Being clear, set the right expectations, all those things that are important to kind of improving your communication skills.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the very valuable sharings, and I feel it very impressive when you show communication like the boss, send email and phone, and I feel this is very important, especially for our new people's early careers, and I feel it's also very important to get people involved, inspired, and let them know you are valuable. But in real case, because we are new people, how to develop this communication skills, or is there more generalized methodologies to communicate effectively with people? Yeah, that's something interesting. Thank you.
Well, I mean, honestly, so I tell I'm a CASPA board member, so I tell all my CASPA board members, in the board meetings, they usually speak Mandarin, but I don't understand it. So I have them, force them to speak English. And the reason why is this, it's not only for me, but because at the end of the day, the more you practice, the better you get at it. When you go back to work, your boss will notice that. It's like, hey, your English has improved so much, right? I want to hire you as the next manager. Toastmasters is a good one, right? You can always go meet up with people and practice. And it's a safe place that people won't criticize you. They give you constructive feedback because they're all learning, they're trying to improve. Another way is become a CASPA volunteer. Do what Brian does, be an MC, right? Or Gary, or run these things, right? Because I can tell you, even though people say, oh, Avery, you're born here, you speak English, and you did marketing and sales, all that, before I joined CASPA, I have to say I've improved immensely after joining CASPA, because when I ran Symposium, we had 500 people I had to talk to in a crowd. The biggest crowd I ever talked to when I was talking to engineers and customers, 50 to 100. 500, I was really shaking my boots in 2014, okay? But you get experience, right? And this is an okay place to fail because you've got all these friends with you. You could practice it here. It's a safe place, it's not like work. Work, if you make a big mistake, we're never gonna promote him again, right? But then suddenly, a lot of our board members have risen in their careers because their bosses recognize that something different about them. Their leadership skills, their communication skills, a lot of things, right? I also was a chair for IEEE, so if you are more technical and you want to volunteer, IEEE we're looking right now for a consumer technology society, so consumer electronics. So if you guys want to be chair or vice chair, whatever, I'm recruiting, so let me know. Again, these are all safe places where you have camaraderie with your fellow colleagues in the industry, right? You have a commonality. I don't know, just if you go to temple or you go to church or whatever your communities, involve yourself in community, right? Where you can get yourself out there, do some public speaking. Doesn't have to be on this scale, right? It could be mentoring kids or mentoring other people, right? Just practicing more. And maybe, okay, I recommend this. In your career, this is not just from a language standpoint, but for many, you should always have a mentor, a sponsor, and a coach. And they're different. But they all kind of do a little bit, okay. So a mentor, so that's what we're doing right now. So I met with two mentees, right? So a mentor, pretty much quarterly, you can meet up with these people. They ask you questions. It's safe because I don't work with them. I'm not their boss. I don't determine their future, but I can give them my feedback on my journey and kind of based on what they want, give them advice where they want to go. Your sponsor typically will be your colleague who's influential to get you promoted or your boss, okay? These are people that see you every day. They evaluate every day, right? They're gonna write you a review. They are the ones that are gonna say, you know what, I have a couple people in mind for the next promotion. I'm not gonna tell you, but I think, what's your name?
Jingwei.
Jingwei. So I think Jingwei is going to be the next guy I want to promote in this group because he stands out. He's done more and he has potential. Even though he may not be manager, but he's groomable to become a manager. If I rise and I become director, I'm going to put him in that position, right? And he also says, and all your colleagues these days, you know how it is, it's not just your boss. All your colleagues feel you're top dog too, right? That's why they will be okay if you get promoted, right? Having someone internally that sees your career and has influence is important. And a coach, I forgot, but coach is another level. So you've got people that tell you what to do, people that listen and then give you advice, and people that actually can determine your future, right? These are important people to start early in your career to have. And some of these people might be able to help you with public speaking and other things, right? Or guide you to resources for that, right? Because they have it. Vested interest for your success. They want to see you successful. And a lot of them, they're like me, you know, I had to learn the hard way, so now I want to give back and help you. And I tell you, my passion, I tell my daughter, same thing. My two passions in life before I pass away is, number one, I want to see more Chinese Americans in high, powerful positions, influential positions in America. We have a lot in China, we have a lot in Taiwan, Singapore. We need it in America, okay? In quote-unquote mainstream companies. Because for some reason, humans, if you don't have that stamp of approval, they just don't see us as trustworthy and as the people at the top. Number two, women, right? So my daughter, right, she's studying social justice, public policy. So she's saying, Dad, double whammy, I'm Asian and I'm a woman, right? So we need to see more women. I mean, that's why you see Ming Yu is our third, is it third or second president? Third, okay, woman president, right? So you can see, if you're capable, I'm not just choosing because you're a woman or because you're Asian, but because we already know that as a woman and an Asian, that person is capable. We're just saying, we just start thinking that way so we don't ignore those people in our network, right? I mean, I'll leave you this. One board director person who's a lady, a white lady, talked to me, right, a couple of months ago. We were having coffee. She's very experienced. She's been on major boards for big corporations. And then she said she was advising her startup entrepreneur who's a guy. They need to find a board of directors, right? Independent board director. So they're having coffee together, and the startup guy goes, I can name 5 guys I want to select. She goes, only guys? Well, do you know any good women? She goes, I'm the one across the table from you who's a woman who's capable. Oh yeah, you are. So she got selected. But you know, she had to speak up because she says not because he had anything against women. It's because the natural thought process is in this society. Guys just naturally think of guys just because we're used to that. We should start changing that. So regardless if you're a guy or a girl or whatever, I'm choosing these 5 candidates that are very qualified, and hopefully some of them are also women, right? Not because of their gender, but because I'm thinking that way, right? So that's one thing. Those are my 2 goals right now.
Thanks, Avery.
Yep.
So if nobody have question, I'm thinking one of the good questions I have, I'm not sure that's good, but I would say, he just mentioned that you have like how to do the emails, all the things. Can you explain a little more? How do you write the emails, all the things? You just quickly show go through that one.
You want
We
to
don't, we don't really see
Yeah.
how do you write down the emails, how to do
Oh,
this.
okay.
Maybe that's very
The
helpful
examples?
to the to all of us to if everybody liked it to see it. I would say just reprint it a bit.
Yeah.
This one.
This one, yeah. Well, so again, right, is when you communicate or when you talk, right, you want to be more proactive or active or positive, right? You don't want to be passive or kind of too humble or too apologetic, right? So, like, sorry, my bad, totally missed that. Okay, first of all, that's very casual, right? My bad is like surfer dude, I do this too because with my close colleagues and friends, but obviously formally you shouldn't do that. But, this is like, okay, you're totally admitting you made a mistake, which is fine, but thanks for letting me know, right? So you see how the tone, remember I talked about tone? How you want people to remember you by? Do you want people to remember you by more of a negative tone? Like, oh, this person always makes mistakes, or this person doesn't have confidence, or always apologizing. I mean, if you really make a big mistake, you should apologize. I'm not saying that. But in general, every day, when you do little things like emails or communicating verbally, you should try to be more positive, right? Always happy to help, right? Rather than no worries or no problem. So this part is probably because it's more formal and also just exuding that my office is always open. I'm open to help people. I'm willing to help people, right? It's not a problem if you ask me for help, right? I like to do this even with people that report to me because I don't want people to feel like, oh, he's the boss. Okay. Remember, you know what a good boss is? Okay, difference between a boss and leader. The boss just means that I write a review and you report to me day to day. A leader is someone that says, I'm not there to micromanage you. I'm there to clear the roadblocks for you to be successful. So for example, I hire Ian. Ian's a very experienced engineer, experienced professional. I don't need to babysit him. But say he runs into a roadblock. Maybe he can't get a colleague in the other business unit to do something. Or he can't do this, and he's tried everything. He comes to me. My job is to talk to the other guy's manager and say, hey, help Ian out, right? We're working together. I'm not there to criticize that Ian didn't do his job, right? I'm there to clear the roadblocks so he can be successful. Because if he's successful, I'm successful, my group is successful, we all win, right? And I should be there to build Ian up and not to put him down, right? So anyways, go back to here. I think it's just thinking differently, right? Using assertive language, positive language. Don't sound too like, oh man, hey, yeah, sorry, I think that will go a long way to changing people's impression about us, right? Because, again, our internal self, our parents always tell us, oh, you have to be humble, your boss, your teacher, always right? No, they're not always right. They're humans just like me, right? But there's a respectful way to disagree and to communicate with them that will also influence and change their minds, right? Because at the end of the day, you are trying to do what's right for the company, for what's right for the boss, right? You're not there to just be negative, right? I don't know if that helps. But you guys can also get a copy of this, and I'm sure you can Google a whole bunch of different ways to write it more positively, right, in your communication.
Yeah, and I also have one question. I think that's related with the community communication, public communication versus the career path you have. I saw that you have been the co-founder of the startup, and currently I'm also working in a startup, and I feel that it's so different from the big company to the startup, the culture and how you interactive with the people, the different level and different function staff you have to face with. So can you please explain more about how your communication skill come with your startup experience?
So you want to know the communication experience bringing into a startup or learning the communication skills to improve in a startup?
Both. Okay. Yeah, I think you already have very good skill before the startup, and I think also the startup help with your skill.
Yeah, no, true. So it's different. It's a different set of skills, right? Because when you're in a startup, typically you have very experienced people that are founders, right? Or maybe you have students out of Stanford that are, But in any case, you have to communicate every day, and you have to pivot, right? There's always some change, right? And like they say in county, right? Even though I'm the chief marketing officer, and everybody goes, "Oh, Avery, you are a boss, you're a CMO." I go, "Do you know what that means in a startup? A CMO of Pepsi is a king or a queen, right? A CMO of a startup, I wash the toilets too. Do you, right? So the question is, you have to be willing to do all kind of things out of your comfort zone, right? And at the end of the day, everything is toward the goal of helping your startup be successful, right? Realizing the vision that you and the co-founders came up with and want to achieve, right? And ultimately, of course, making money, right? To pay the bills and stuff, to keep going. So in order for that to happen, you have to learn how to also deal with each other's egos, each other's, positives, negatives. And then ultimately, right, I don't know if you're on the funding side or engineering side or dealing with customers, but those different things, you kind of have to change your hat, right? Like, I might be marketing guy one minute, and the next minute I'm trying to talk to investor like I'm the CEO, because my CEO was a crazy smart engineer, but he was not a good communicator and not very good from a business standpoint. So I had to be the guy pitching in front of the investors, right? So I had to put on my hat like, okay, what do these guys want? And I had to sell the vision, right, to these investors. Or I'm talking to customers. Why would they buy, right? Would they actually pay for this? Everybody says this is a great idea, but when you actually ask them to pull out the check to make the payment, that proves whether or not they believe in your vision and your product, right? So those different skills, right, you learn along the way. And I think actually the best thing doing a startup is, if you ever had an MBA, it's better to do a real life startup. That is the real life MBA. Okay, you are the actual case study. You're creating the case study as you go. Okay, right? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Avery, for today's very wonderful speech. Let's thank you, Avery, with our warm applause.